I am Jamie Kinsley. I am the Natural Resource Specialist on the Cheyenne National Grasslands. The American bison would have been found all over North Dakota back pre-settlement time. It would have moved into an area, grazed it heavily, and then moved out, just following its grazing patterns. It would have came back maybe every 3 to 5 years, depending on if something happened, like a fire caused by a lightning strike might have caused it to come back into an area sooner, just because of the higher protein in that grass. Basically, they were pretty much all wiped out through hunting, but historically you would have found them everywhere out here. They basically can recharge aquifers. They put in ponds and dams to create these pools that certain species depend on. And then it also brings in different native vegetation, or sometimes non-native vegetation, that which brings in different pollinators, different birds. They literally engineer an ecosystem. They can decide if it's going to stay a river. They'll decide if it's going to go from a river to a creek. Then they can make it into a pool and a dam. Then they might put it back into the river. It's just very interesting what they decide to do and where they decide to do it. Depending on what they decide to do there, will decide what habitat's there, what species will be there. The greater prairie chicken has been historically found here. We're technically on the fringe of their historic habitat. So we don't necessarily, even pre-settlement, we didn't really have the greatest habitat. Their population was so large that they forced them into the fringes. However, because of the protection that's happened here, we've held on to that population. There's this population, and then there's a reintroduced population up by Grand Forks, but there's no connectivity between it, so they're kind of breeding themselves out. And that kind of is where the sharptail comes in, because the sharptail is basically taking over that niche. Sharptails and greater prairie chickens kind of use the same habitat. The sharptail is a little more adaptable than the greater prairie chicken. So the pollinators, they basically are how we survive. They provide ecological services for about 85% of all the plant species in the world. And I think over 28% of those are crops. Without them, the crops don't complete their life cycle, which means we don't get the food sources from them. We have the eastern pollinators, and we also have a mix of the western pollinators. Some of the ones that we do have at home here are, we have a large monarch population, which is becoming imperiled. We also have about, I want to say, 5 to 8 species of bats that call the Cheyenne home. And then we also have the regal fritillary, which is another butterfly moth species. You need to get it native enough that it will provide the food sources the pollinators need when they need in their life cycle. So when they first emerge, they need a lot of food. When they're breeding, they need quite a bit of food. Towards the end of their life, it's more about, they don't need as much, but then there's another population emerging at that time, so they need different things. So it's just kind of about finding that balance and what we can provide enough resources for them to meet every cycle. Cropland is great. It provides certain things, but it's kind of like an invasive species. It provides it that certain time of the year, and that's it. And once it gets taken off, it's gone, and there's nothing for them to be there for. So it's the balance. You need all of it. It's just a matter of figuring out the balance.